prepare for hunger. The pain never stops. If you think that the empty shelves we're seeing are quite distressing and that food prices are extremely expensive right now, just wait until the winter begins. This winter is going to be very difficult for all of us. In this video, we compile the signs that show how bad things are going to be. But before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to be notified when new content is posted. The food crisis that is unfolding before our eyes is getting worse by the day. Global food supplies were already tight in the past few years, but the food that wasn't produced in 2022 means that we're going to be hit by even harder challenges in the next few months.
The world is struggling to feed itself.
A planet that once looked like it was winning the war on starvation is now heading for disaster.
At this point, worldwide fertilizer prices have quadrupled. Several countries started banning exports of essential commodities. Tens of millions of chickens and turkeys have disappeared from the system. Our domestic beef cattle herd has dramatically shrunk, and crazy weather patterns have resulted in the destruction of millions of acres of crops all over the planet. We haven't even seen the worst of food shortages and price increases yet, but around the world food banks are already reaching a breaking point. All over the countries, food banks are struggling to keep up with the increased demand they are experiencing. The rising cost of food and fuel is creating a situation.
Food security has taken center stage. UN meet on global food security call to action was held at New York, which was chaired by US Secretary of State Antony Blinken. And UN Chief Antonio Guterres at the meet warned that the growing global food security crisis could extend for decades if allowed to go unchecked.
As precarious for people trying to feed their families as it was during the pandemic, inflation is devastating the budgets of families, the elderly, and those barely surviving, and is driving more and more people to turn to food banks on a daily basis. There is a risk of food shortages in the UK this winter, experts say, as drought and high petrol prices put pressure on farmers, while growers who use glasshouse are either not sowing or waiting until spring when there are more daylight hours.
There is one person dying from hunger every minute across Ethiopia, Kenya, and Somalia. In West Africa, the region is facing its worst hunger crisis in a decade.
But when there's never been more food and there's never been more farming, how is this possible?
It's an extraordinary situation, isn't it? A world of great abundance. I mean, we have a massive surplus of food. Twice as many calories are produced that humans need to support themselves, and yet we see rising hunger once again.
The crops that would usually have sustained the country during fallow periods, such as cabbages, carrots, and potatoes, are likely to have reduced yields because of the drought. The fruit and vegetable sector is undoubtedly in crisis. Many growers have suffered a 20% reduction in crop production this year, and most growers anticipate further reductions next year, without immediate and concerted action by government.
Now we're talking of a crisis, but many countries are already facing the ramifications of this food crisis that has been sparked by Russian invasion into Ukraine. Italian Prime Minister Mario Draghi spoke to Russian President Vladimir Putin regarding this issue. He accepted that this issue exists, but he's refused to take the fault for it. Moscow blames this entire crisis on Western sanctions on Russia.
We can expect to see growing businesses go bust and shortages on supermarket shelves. It can no longer be hidden or denied. Global warming is boosting extreme weather events at a staggering rate. Man-made climate collapse is accelerating the toll of extreme weather across the globe. People around the world are losing their lives and livelihoods to heat waves, floods, forest fires, and increasingly deadly and frequent droughts caused by the climate crisis.
The United Nations Secretary General says the world is heading for a catastrophe unless climate change is prioritized. New figures released by the UN show concentrations of the three main greenhouse gases rose to record levels in the atmosphere last year. World leaders will meet next month in Egypt for the next UN Climate Summit, COP27.
A survey by a leading NGO found that inflation and supply chain problems are taking a heavy toll on food banks, with 70% of their members reporting that food donations are down, while operating costs have risen by 95%. It is a confluence of many catastrophes affecting our food supply chains at once.
Impact that this move will have as far as the food crisis is concerned, and the impact that the Russia-Ukraine war has already had when it comes to food insecurity. Now, before the pandemic, 135 million people were food insecure. That number was already bad enough. Now, 276 million people across the world have no food security. Over 500,000 are experiencing famines. These are all signs of a global food crisis, one that will only worsen in the coming days.
And the most worrying thing is that, according to experts, we have not yet seen the worst. Food shortages are a reality, not a theory, and people should start preparing while they can. Industry executives are explicitly telling us that food prices will not come down anytime soon.
We're facing a food pricing problem in 2022 that's creating havoc around the world. Well, if we don't get on top of this thing quickly, and I don't mean next year, I mean this year, you will have a food availability problem in 2023, and that's going to be hell on earth.
And the convergence of all these factors is creating a perfect storm for food inflation in both the short and long term. So, if you still have a job, take advantage of this precious opportunity to stockpile food before the economy cracks much hotter.